pollution is in one area will affect other areas. And in fact, if you go on the west coast and the northern part of Norway, on the outside, as I would say, of Norway, you'll find that the plastic litter you find there comes from everywhere else. On the inside, in our fjords and others, I think we should take the responsibility for most of it ourselves, but that comes from all other parts. Marine litter is one of the fastest growing environmental concerns. Every minute, the estimated 15 tons of litter enter our oceans. And you know, fish eat plastic and we eat fish. And a new study suggests that on average, we ingest 5 grams of plastic every week, which is equivalent to a credit card. And I don't know if anybody of you have tried to eat your credit card. I think you will have some problems. Some of us should use it, so we didn't use it in the shops, but it's... Of course, this is a situation that's not sustainable for the oceans. It's not sustainable for us as mankind in the world. And we have a shared interest in keeping our oceans healthy and keeping them productive. Therefore, we have launched a $200 million program to assist developing states all over the world to combat marine litter and microplastic. In parallel, we are working to establish a global agreement to prevent marine litter and microplastics. And one of the things that we have to work on is to find a good balance between exploitation and protection of living marine resources. Norway has long experience in ocean management, aimed at maintaining healthy marine systems while we manage to harvest the ocean resources. And I'm happy to announce that we in October will launch a new program, Ocean for Development, a supplement to our existing development cooperation on sustainable ocean management. The core of this program will be technical cooperation and capacity development within ocean governance. Knowledge-based integrated management of the ocean is the key to ensure balance between protection and sustainable use. So working with developing countries on how to manage oceans is not only the benefit of the developing countries participating in the program, but it's also in our self-interest. So for all of those who think we should do less on international cooperation, today's world, we should use more time on it because it is our self-interest if we manage the world in a better way. The oceans, like climate change issues, knows no border. Our goal is clean oceans and strong ocean economy in Norway, but it's very dependent on good ocean management in countries and continents far away from our waters. There's still a great deal we don't know about the oceans, but we know enough to act about the situation in the oceans, and we know that we need to do this together. It's one of the issues where I think there is a possibility for bigger international movement these days. But we have to manage it, we have to organize it, and we have to make sure that we're not just trying to solve one little problem. We have to see the interconnection of all of the problems that the oceans are facing. And for Norway, small country with between 6 and 7 times as large ocean area as land area, with an economy that is very ocean-based, it's vital for us that we manage to keep the oceans clean and that we manage to work with other countries to secure this in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, and thank you for announcing our new development program. I will now ask the rest of you to, not the rest of you, but the speakers to join up here. And Vidar Helgesen, the Norwegian ambassador for the ocean, will have prepared many questions, I'm sure.
Thank you, Malin, and thanks to the speakers for setting the stage in what is actually creating a kind of sense of schizophrenia, because on the one hand we're hearing a lot about despair, a lot of ocean decline. On the other hand, we're hearing a lot of the ocean opportunities. And to get a grip on that, the Prime Minister emphasized knowledge, the need for a knowledge-based approach, which was certainly underpinned by Cecil's strong emphasis on ocean science. The wealth of the ocean depends on the health of the ocean. And we've heard from the Minister as well as from the Director General of NORAD that development action can play a role both in addressing the decline of the ocean and in enhancing the opportunities of the ocean, encompassed in so many of the SDGs. Now, this is a glimpse of Norway's current state of play on the ocean. And Peter, I'd like to ask you, you mentioned that there is, not only in Norway but globally, more attention on the ocean, on the decline and the opportunities. But we're seeing steady decline. We're seeing a lot of despair. Conferences are important signs that things are moving, but are you seeing concrete actions? Are you seeing concrete signs of hope for actual improvement?
Look, I'm neither an optimist nor a pessimist. I think that's a bit of a waste of time. We have to be pragmatists with what we're faced with. I would say that we are, as I was explaining to you before about how the UN Ocean Conference has made everybody aware that the ocean is in trouble and ocean action work is now underway with, as I said, Norway leading the charge in that regard. But I would say we're kind of in a neutral ground at the moment. And I'll give you some examples. We're about to start the UN Decade for Ocean Science. Why do we need that? We know about 5% of what's out in the ocean scientifically. We've got to get that other 95%. And actually, Peter Hogan is over there in the corner. He was president of the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission that brought this decade into existence. That's going to be a huge leap forward. So we're not yet there. In terms of fisheries management, you would probably have seen that FAO has said that 33% of our fish are being driven to extinction, and the other 66% are being fished to their biologically sustainable limits. I've heard last week from FAO, because I was trying to get the forecast of where is that trending now. It's called the SOFIA report, which is the report that gets all the fisheries information from all around the world and puts it together. So the SOFIA report is where that 33% figure comes from. The SOFIA report is next due around about June next year. And from what I have learned from FAO, it's going to be about the same picture. In other words, it's not getting worse. So again, I think we're in neutral territory. We're getting that under control through our regional fisheries management organizations. Let me give you another example. We're in kind of neutral ground. Cut me off, Vidar, when I go for too long. Another example would be harmful fisheries subsidies. You know, currently there is $23 billion worth of subsidies given to the fishing fleets of the world to go out and chase diminishing stocks of fish. I mean, sort of human insanity. But that is being reined back through the WTO negotiations in Geneva. And those are underway now. And there's a good chance, and I'm doing a lot of work with them in Geneva, that those harmful fisheries subsidies will come to an end, will be banned by the end of this year. There's a good chance. There are a few countries which are doing pushback, but good chance. So imagine that $23 billion, instead of being given to industrial fleets to go out and chase diminishing stocks of fish, are going to be able, that money is going to be able to spend on good stuff, like helping artisanal fishers and helping fishermen find alternative work to do as fish disappears and so on. I think also the last thing I'd say is that in fisheries, sustainable aquaculture, people have really got it into their heads that this is the future for humanity's protein now. You would have heard of the Eat Lancet report, which said eat less red meat, but eat more fish. Where's the fish going to come from if wild stocks are under stress? Obviously from sustainable aquaculture. And again, I think with what Norway is doing with open sea aquaculture development, everybody's watching that very closely. Land-based aquaculture in Africa will be the other big one for overcoming our protein challenges of the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. You mentioned the need for more fish, and Cecil, you ended your intervention by talking about the opportunities that exist in the twilight zone, the mesopelagic fish and the role of science in mapping and identifying opportunities. Where do we stand on that? Where do you see opportunities for industrial scale, job creating and poverty and hunger eradicating action from the ocean?
First of all, I would say that the Prime Minister, she made my day by announcing the Ocean for Development. So I'm so in yippee mode now. But back to your question, I think that that is a great opportunity to start with opportunities. And there again come that these mesopelagic organisms, that is a symbol of the largest biomass in the ocean we haven't explored more or less at all. So here again comes the fish policies. Peter Thompson mentioned one paradox, but there are so many paradoxes related to take care of every fish that's brought on the ship, and also to use these resources, as you all have been mentioning, about actually take care of the resources. Here we need to think differently, but we also need to think about not only fish management, but ecosystem management. Because if we then balance all the creatures inside the ecosystem, we have to have different kind of knowledge. At IMR, we are caring for 104 stocks. That means that they are not very economical important to us, but they are part of a web. And here again, we need to look into this if we are going to think about opportunities. And here again come knowledge in a different way. In medicine, we are talking about lethal dose 50. That means 50% is dead. But here we are talking about healthy oceans, and that means that we have to think always about how to use the knowledge about adjustment of where we are going to take out resources, because then we have good blue economy for eternity. So I think also we as scientists have to think differently, not by managing and think about one stock at a time, but again into ecosystem. And that is extremely challenging by collecting data and do science differently.
Prime Minister, you referred to, and several have referred to, the high-level panel for a sustainable ocean economy, which you are chairing. You emphasized that knowledge needs to be the basis, and the panel has commissioned a lot of science. 165 scientists globally are now working to supply you with a lot of that information. Now, you're also meeting a lot of leaders internationally, and we're in a time globally when knowledge basis is not always, knowledge is not always the basis for policy making. What do you intend to do to make this knowledge-based approach of the panel have an impact? And in your conversations with global leaders, where oceans is now more and more of a topic, what is your sense of the opportunity for Norway, but also for the international community, to make progress for proper ocean management?
Well, I think you have to combine the scientific knowledge with the emotions and the feeling people have of seeing a problem. And what people do see about the ocean now is they see the problem. Of course, plastic is one of the issues. I've been to the Caribbean to a meeting, the sargassum, which is the seaweed that is out of proportion, that is fed on nutrition from down the Amazon and others. It's another issue, you know, that's really challenging a lot of beautiful islands tourist industry, because it smells terribly and it's very difficult to get rid of, and trying to find ways of doing it. I think you have to combine these things. And that's what bioplastic in a way is an eye-opener in a lot of places around the world. If you are going to the nicest place in the world and you find plastic on the beach, people are getting more concerned. When tourist industry sees that the consequences of what's happening is so is hurting their bottom lines, they're hurting their profits and income, I mean, they will understand it. And And getting, in a lot of countries, I think it's, I went to Ghana and I went to a fish market. We had a very interesting discussion with the fishermen there, with the Minister of Fisheries, who had just stopped for 1 month fisheries for them, and they were not very happy because there were some international trawlers, of course, further up, but they were trying to manage the stocks. You have to also combine this with getting the understanding that in the long term, your jobs will be less safe if you are overusing and over-harvesting your fish resources, which is, I think, one of the things that we have managed in Norway. When I became Member of Parliament in 1989, the winter of 1990, that was dark sea. There was nothing in the north. I went to the meeting of the trawler industry in Norway, and they were all putting their boats at shore because there were nothing to fish. They always have an argument with the scientists on how much fish there really was. That you will never end, I think. There will always be a discussion on that. But the fact is that the knowledge and understanding, and you have to combine that. In politics, you have to combine science also with understanding of emotions and people's need for a livelihood. I think that's extremely important both in the climate debate and in the ocean debate. People have to feed their families. They have to have an income. And you have to make sure that you develop these together. That's why you have to do this sustainable ocean economy, not just conserving the oceans, but in fact, I say sustainable use of it, because people will need jobs. We will need to work with the oceans in the future.
Thank you. And I am aware that you have to dash out fairly soon, but thank you for that response. Now, we've heard about some praise for Norway's ocean leadership and the Prime Minister's leadership. We've heard some praise for Norway's science leadership, Peter Haugan and Cecil. Norway has by far the most ocean scientists per capita than any other country. In development and in the global development community, the ocean isn't very high on the agenda, but it's getting there, and Norway is making some effort. And I'm going to challenge you as the Director General for NORAD. Do you see Norway stepping up as a leader in ocean for development, not only by establishing Norway's own program, but also in getting other countries, getting the global development community to pay more attention to the ocean?
I wish I could answer a very simple yes. And to the first part of your question, I think I can answer a very simple yes. That we are, through the political leadership of the Prime Minister and the scientific leadership of our science community and the managerial competence of our fisheries management. I mean, we are, and what we are doing is, of course, to translating this into something that we can make available for developing countries. I mean, to translate this Norwegian experience into something that developing countries can benefit from. And that we can do, that we can promise, and the government is giving us more resources to do that, so that we can deliver. Then there is the next step, of course, which is to see how can we, as the Prime Minister also, how can we transform our role then into something bigger by getting others, because we are big and important, but we're only a small country in the world. And of course, if we cannot manage to get other bigger, more important countries to engage in this issue, we can succeed locally, but we will not succeed globally. And I think, as the Prime Minister hinted to, the question of how do we get a political alliance to forge this agenda, to bring it forward in a global political context that isn't exactly conducive to multilateral cooperation. And I very much share the perspective that if we're going to succeed on that, we have to build on, one, where do people see benefit? And two, where do people see problems? and sort of to see what building on opportunities that people see to gain more money, earn more money from the fish, to have better nutrition, and the problems that people see, then that can help build the global political movement that we need in order to move the global agenda forward.
Peter, you're representing the UN, but you're also representing a developing country. What's your perspective on the development agenda broadly, and how the ocean can be placed more prominently there? And what are the needs, if you look from a developing country perspective?
I think I go back to what I just finished on last time, which was sustainable aquaculture. I mean, this is something that anybody with a coastline can get into, and you don't have to have a coastline with land-based aquaculture. You know, China, for example, is the leading aquaculture country in the world, and most of it's land-based. You know, it's tilapia. That's the kind of species which, of course, will feed Africa, and that might be the kind of development that we will see in aquaculture more than any other. But for development side, I mean, basically, I think what people should understand, there are 5 problems that the ocean has, and that the first 2 are eminently fixable, and I think under these sustainable development goals will be fixed. The first of those is fisheries, and that's just about better management, and on the development side, you know, it's aquaculture, but it's also better science-based management of fisheries resources. So and getting rid of harmful subsidies and so on. So that is eminently doable, and I do believe we'll have it done by 2030. The second one is pollution. The Prime Minister mentioned plastic pollution, but she also touched on what's coming down the rivers. And that's extremely important, because it's not just the seaweed, the Saragossa seaweed, which is killing off tourist industries on the Atlantic side of the Caribbean islands, but it's also creation of dead zones, what's coming down the Mississippi and what's coming down the great rivers of Southeast Asia, creating these dead zones where there's just no life. There's now 500 of these dead zones that have been identified. Raw sewage, industrial runoff, you know, agriculture runoff. Again, that's fixable. That's just man management. So those first 2, pollution and fishing, are fixable. The other 3 are really the long haul ones. And this is acidification. You know, think anything that's that needs calcium carbonate, like backbone or shellfish or whatever, very much more difficult for the young of those to actually come into existence under an acidifying ocean. Likewise, a deoxygenating ocean, less and less oxygen. And these are both trending the wrong way at the moment, and have been for a long time. And then the third one is warming. And if you think warming, you've got to think of death of coral by the time we get to 2 degrees. You've got to think of rising sea levels, you know, nations going out of existence, river deltas going out of existence. That's all due to ocean warming. So those 3, acidification, deoxygenation, and warming, all have one common enemy, just one common enemy. And that's what we've got to work at, and it's a much longer haul exercise, and that's greenhouse gas emissions. Those 3 are caused by our greenhouse gas emissions. So on the development side, I'd say climate change and ocean change, inseparable. The work we're doing on getting our greenhouse gas emissions down is ocean work.
Prime Minister, yesterday the televised party leader debate had a fairly long session on climate change. What do you think the panel, high-level panel, can deliver in terms of ocean
I'm
and
not so sure it was climate change we discussed. And I'm not sure we discussed. We quarreled, I think, but it's, I think the high-level panel can show just this combination, that the climate change and the change of the oceans is very interlinked, that it's things we have to deal with together. It's also, in fact, that oceans can help us with climate change because of its ability to bind CO2. So it's also the other way around. It's not just that climate change affects the ocean. Oceans changing will also affect climate change. So it's a need to see these things interlinked. In fact, I always believe that these 17 goals have to be looked at interlinked, because it's the understanding that you also have to create livelihoods, jobs, all of these other issues at the same time. They are in a way inseparable, even if they are linked together. So I think we need to step up, of course, on climate change. We are one of the most important parts of the Paris Agreement, by my view, was the fact that which was, I think, totally decisive for getting that through, was the work that we were doing on making sure that it was not a 15 years plan, but it was a revision every 5th year, that we all have to go and look at our goals, and we will do that next year, and there will be a start at the UNGA this year with the Secretary General's call for a summit on climate, and we have to step up our game. We have said that we will increase our targets up to 45% of our non-ETS sectors in our society, and that we're also working so that EU will increase its targets on the total, so that our ETS targets also will become higher. But we hope and think it's important that in 2020 that more countries are stepping up the game, stepping up with new targets, and of course increasing the different actions they have on this. We have different economies, and we have different challenges on climate change, but I think in the ocean phrase, this interlinkage is extremely important.
Thank you so much. And apparently you have to go now. But I'm
This is like hunger.
But I'm going to have one final. Normally, the politician gets to get the last word, but I think here we're going to give the scientist the last word. You might want to say something inspired by Peter or whatever, but I'm also going to ask you on this issue of development. Norway is doing, and the Institute for Marine Research is doing quite a huge effort through the Nansen program on supporting countries in building science. Can that be stepped up? Since there's been so much emphasis here on a knowledge-based approach, what can Norway do developmentally to make more countries able to take a knowledge-based approach?
I'm very happy that you asked me that question, because I'm really now looking forward to the second phase of the Nansen program, because I think that now we have an opportunity to step it up. And I think that one thing is the focus on the management of the ocean resources, but mentioning also aquaculture. I also then think that we have to actually divide the program more related to the oceans, that's outside the economical zone, but then also inside the different nations' economical zones. And there the coastal management will be critical. And since there are hardly any fish stocks that's managed by only one nation, again, it means good neighborhood and collaboration also in the coastal zone. We call the coastal zone action zone, or even battle zone, because there are so many different interests. But if we then make that split into what is the economical zone for the nations and the different way of thinking, regional thinking, and then management of the ocean thinking, I think then also we will think in a very better way related to science and management. And then again also competence building. And here we have to fragment that up, not only in silos but in teams, because everything now is interdisciplinary. So I'm so happy what we have heard today, and also to think about aquaculture. We have to look for different species that's locally adaptable, and the footprint from aquaculture has to be managed in a best way. And that is also why we need to be able to have knowledge how to localize the aquaculture plant so that we get a lower footprint. So I'm looking forward to that we can now look at a different way of splitting up, and also do freshwater management related to rivers and also to aquaculture, because it's so important for food security. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to hand over to our host for closing remarks.
Wow. Three things. One, I think we have seen that we have the political leadership that we need in order to make a difference. And our general experience is that if Norway is going to make a difference globally, we need that. We need some basic ingredients. One basic ingredient is political leadership. The other basic ingredients that we need and that we also have is knowledge. And we've got, through the institutions that we have established in order to deal with Norwegian problems as a point of departure, but with an increasing international orientation. We also, through your institute, through Liv's institute, through our universities and our ministry, we have a knowledge base that we can share with developing countries. Then we need a third ingredient, which is money. And we're getting more money to this. So what I see is that we have now in place the ingredients that could make Norway a sort of global leader in the management of marine resources, in the management of the oceans, both for our common benefit as a world, but also so that it can be an important instrument in our main objective, which is to deal with the remaining 700 million poor people in the world. Thank you all for coming. Thanks to the panel for contributing.